Well, here we are. See, it's live. It's live, Rich. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, all good, all good.
That's good. You look very well, actually.
It's a little bit fresh-faced, I think. I've ran a 10K this morning, a 10K
All
race.
right.
As you know from previous chats, I'm new to running. So this was my second 10K race. And the reason I've decided to do that is to promote the diet and lifestyle, because obviously coming from a bodybuilding background, running and cycling are a complete 180 to what I'm used to doing. So I've begun running. So today was my second 10K race, and I came in on a hilly course of just under 300 foot of elevation at around, I think it was 40 minutes, 52 seconds. So another couple of minutes to be had on a flatter course. And if you can tell by the sound of my voice, I've suffered with a flu of some description all week. So I haven't been race fit today, but very pleased with that performance. So yeah, fresh-faced.
And so what is the real reason for running then? Just overall health, or what are you doing it for?
So I used to compete professionally as a men's physique bodybuilder. I won the British Championship, a European Championship. And for me to progress on from that, and I was clean, I was unsupplemented. For me to progress further, it would have meant having to supplement. Now, I'm not against supplementing. I think, that sport is open to it, and it's, they have tested and non-tested federations. Now, I used to compete in both because the prize money was better in the non-tested. But I was clean, so I used to compete in both. Anything that you would take would be in your system for an awful long time. But the reason I began competing was to promote the diet, the lifestyle, the changes that I'd made over the years. But for me to progress further would have meant to be competitive, to remain competitive, and to move up the ladder, I would have needed to have supplemented. And it's not something that I wanted to go down. It's not a road that I wanted to go down. I was already suffering with lower back pain because my frame was too heavy. My upper torso was too heavy for my frame, because my frame is incredibly small. And it's a lonely sport. It involved training long hours and by myself at stupid o'clock because of the hours that I work. So it was lonely. It was a lonely sport. So now I've joined a local running club with a group of triathletes and Ironmen that I've worked with over the years on nutrition, and I've begun running and cycling. So yeah, health, well-being. I've had to sacrifice a lot of mass. So I'm currently anywhere between 28 and to 40 pound smaller than I am normally at this time of the year. But yeah, for the greater good, I think for longevity purposes, running and cycling. But I want to prove to people within that community that clean eating involves restricting of grains and seed oils, and the way of eating that we speak about quite often. Clean eating, real eating, it makes a massive difference. I'm not a fit person. I've only recently started running and cycling, literally within the last few months, and I'm already fairly competitive within my category, if you like. Then my 5K is already sub 19. There's a lot faster people out there running 16-minute 5Ks on these park runs, but these are people who have been avid runners for a long time. So to come into it and only have a few runs under your belt and literally a few months and run a sub 19, and what I think off the back of today's run, I think I'm capable of a 38 on a 10K. So that's quite incredible. So yeah, and it's addictive. The feeling, the euphoria you get from running is, it's called runner's euphoria, isn't it? And it's true. You feel good after running. Not so much now. I feel absolutely exhausted and short of breath. But yes, so I like to stay active. And again, it's just we need to push the health benefits of living our lifestyle. I think it's easy to tell somebody how good living the lifestyle is, but numbers and stats speak a different story. And when people can see someone who's new to running and new to cycling, I did an 80-mile bike ride recently. So again, I started running and cycling at the same time. I did an 80-mile bike ride on one 700ml bottle of water, which contained electrolytes and MCT powder, and that was it. I was cycling with a group of Ironmen who have been cycling for years and years and years, and they had to supplement with chocolate bars and sweets and energy drinks and energy gels, and they couldn't comprehend that I had completed this 80-mile ride on just one bottle of water with electrolytes, MCT powder, and that was it. And to top it off, I had the highest moving average. So I was the fastest out of all of these Ironman athletes. Only by like 0.1 mile an hour, but still I'll take it.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, that's a common question about fueling, because I did the middle distance running when I was high carb, and I did all that. I did all the gels and, orange slices as I was running around, and jelly babies and all that sort of stuff. And I wish in a way that I was interested in running now as a carnivore, because I think it would be different, but it doesn't interest me. I've got to be honest. As an individual, it interests me when I'm coaching people to do it, and I'm interested in what you're doing. But I'm more a fan of walking or hiking or something like that. I don't know. I think my road running days are behind me, not for any other reason than it just doesn't float my boat, as they say. But I certainly appreciate what you're doing, and certainly with the cycling. Cycling is something I used to do for recreation when I was a teenager. Used to cycle everywhere, to be honest, and miles and miles and miles. But the competitive side of it, I don't think I've got into, and I'm certainly not into the going out on a Sunday morning with like 15 other cyclists wearing all the lycra and the funny shoes and the hats and annoying people in capes, So, but I love that you're doing it, and I think,
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because behind you there's a picture of you ripped and very muscular, and I think that is possibly not attainable for the average person. Whereas,
but I disagree. And
good.
this is,
yes, well, that's the point of doing this, isn't it?
Yeah. I completely disagree, because we've discussed this previously. I'm not genetically gifted. I used to be clinically obese. I was type 2 diabetic. I was talking with my brother today. We went for a meal. It was a mixed grill, cooked with no seed oils, by the way. Always stipulated when I eat out. And we brought up the fact to Amanda, my wife, who was sitting there, who didn't believe me when I told her previously how ill I was in my 20s, because my family genuinely thought that I wasn't going to see my 30th birthday. And my brother brought this up. I was so unwell. I could barely walk up the stairs without stopping or being severely out of breath. And, to achieve, what is it there? Check things. I'm a normal person. I'm less than normal. I'm substandard. There is nothing special about me. I'm not genetically gifted. The difference is I wanted to achieve something and live in this lifestyle. And as we've discussed previously, the lifestyle has been incremental. I'm carnivore now, which is still in the metabolic state of ketosis, but I began my journey low carb, then keto. I used to eat lots of plants in the early days because I believed that they were healthy for me. Now I know better. But I wanted to prove that the lifestyle that I had lived, that changed my life, reversed my diabetes, allowed me to lose 107 pounds, cured my debilitating daily migraines that would make me blind, and helped me manage depression and anxiety. This lifestyle is nothing short of what I would call a miracle cure. It is the magic elixir to almost every illness and disease that we know of. And I genuinely, wholeheartedly believe that. So I began competing in order to show people, because people look with it, I know it sounds like a stupid say, but people look with their eyes. If you look healthy, they're more likely to believe. Now that, believe it or not, is not healthy. That was sub 3% body fat. I was in the 2% body fat range there, but it was fit for purpose. But it showed people that I was able to go from being clinically obese to becoming #1 at a pro level in Britain and Europe. If I can do it, everyone can. The difference is you've got to want to do that. That needs to be a goal that you want to achieve, because it did involve an awful lot of training and what many would deem to be strict in regards to nutrition. You and I would disagree that, because we love the food that we eat. It's just food to us. So the nutrition side wasn't difficult, but for somebody coming off the high street, the food we eat is well far out there, isn't it? But when we take a step back and look at what we do eat, we eat real food. Whereas I didn't used to eat real food. I used to eat Franken foods, pizzas and Burger King, McDonald's, KFC. I did go through spells of eating healthy, or what I thought was healthy, but I became more unwell. So this is not unattainable. You've just got to want it. But I can understand what you mean in regards to the running and cycling, because an awful lot more people will run and cycle. And I think, coming back to what you said, that 7:30, 6:30 a.m. start on a Sunday morning with a group of riders, I love it. I'm part of a family. I'm part of a group of people that have the same interest as myself, a group of people who, some of the nicest people that I've ever met in my life, I get to ride with on a Sunday morning, usually, bar today because I was running, obviously. But coming from a bodybuilding background and training, sometimes at midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, if I had a competition coming up, I would train religiously, and most of that was done by myself, with my headphones on or the music blasting, with nothing more than my own thoughts to carry me through. But now I've got people I can speak with, people with the same interest. And I had, coming back to what you said, I had no interest in running. I hate running. I can't. It hurts. It's hard. When I began running, I couldn't run further than 1.5k for the first 3 runs, and this was only a few months ago. And it took me, the first time I did 5k was 42 minutes, and now it's sub 19. But I had worked with these people on their nutrition, these Ironmen, and I've gone to support them during Ironman competitions, doing triathlons, doing duathlons, and watching the things that they achieved with making the dietary changes that we had implemented was absolutely phenomenal. And I thought, I think I want a piece of this. And I kind of fell into it by accident, because I came away from the bodybuilding and I wanted to gravitate into powerlifting. So I'd shown that aesthetics was possible with a keto diet. And it is immensely possible, because we burn fat for fuel. What better way is there to strip up and lose body fat? And that's why I won, why I used to win. I didn't win because of my genetics. I won because I was utilizing a tool that nobody else was utilizing. But I've lost my trail of thought. But so
you were saying that you hate running. I mean, but you enjoy it.
Yeah.
You enjoy the socializing with the cycling. Yeah.
So I was going to gravitate into powerlifting, because I was working with a powerlifter. The gentleman I work with is rated #2 in Britain in his category, and I was stronger than he was, and I'd never trained for power. So I thought, well, maybe there's another angle here. Maybe I can show people you can be strong on keto as well, because that's another common misconception, that we need carbs to build muscle, and we need carbs for energy, we need carbs for power and strength, and it's a complete fallacy. So I began training for powerlifting, and I tore my pec. I injured, so I had to pull away from the powerlifting. And during the interim, while I was recovering, I decided to start running with this club. They've been nagging me for an awful long time to do some running, so I started running with them, and yeah, it grew from there. The bug grabbed me, and I became addicted. I still don't know if I like running. I think today really hurt. It did. It hurt. It hurt a lot. But the feeling after, when I checked and noticed that I'd just taken 2 minutes off my PB from the time previously, and knowing that if the course was a flatter course, I would have had a sub 40. Just a couple of months into running is absolutely incredible. And I'm enthused to see how far I can go. I don't think I'm going to reach the heights of some of these local runners you see running local park runs in 5K times, but I'm gravitated into duathlon and triathlon. And if I can be competitive within my age category, within that, I'll be happy. But it'd be interesting to see how things progress. So we shall see. Watch this space.
Yeah, it's funny because I did it earlier. I mean, in my 20s, I did my bodybuilding show, totally natural, by the way, and high carb. And then when I got into my 40s, that's when I got into running, and I lived in a place called Rye, and I was part of Rye Runners. So one of the things I should say, don't forget, I play devil's advocate. So I'm trying to get you to talk. I mean, it's not going to be an echo chamber, this. There's no point in me going, yeah, I feel the same. I feel the same. It's a bit boring. So I did spark you up a little bit there about the cyclists. I never got into cycling. I don't know. I think just from seriously living in the countryside and having cafes ruined by cyclists coming in en masse and maybe has put me off a little bit. But running, so I joined Rye Runners after my first I was going to say my first divorce, after my divorce with my first wife, and it was something to do, basically. I mean, I thought this would be nice, meet some new people and really get into it. And I got totally hooked. I got absolutely hooked. You're right. It was really painful at first. And I was pitiful. The people running it, I mean, Jeff, who ran Rye Runners, was somebody who has won marathons, he's won the race. So it was a really inspiring person to be trained by, and his wife, I think, wrote for Runners World and was a brilliant runner in her own right. And it was a really nice group. And how we used to do it was, I think there was like 30 people on a Wednesday and on 30 people on a Saturday morning, something like that. And the really fast runners would run out, and then they would double back and go to the end. So we'd be running and they'd go back this way and come up from behind to keep us as a nice compact unit, which I thought was really good. And then one of the runners there said to me, "You'll get hooked. You'll get interested in the stats. You'll get interested in the data." And I was like, "I really won't. I'm just doing this." So then I joined. I did a 5K race, pretty much like you just said. It was. So I was 40 and I was getting overtaken by people in their 80s. I mean, seriously. They were so fit. It was unbelievable. And that was a big boot up the behind for me. Don't forget, I was still high carb at that point. And I just got into it. I mean, Rye is a beautiful place to run around as well. And we would do some really interesting training. And every month there was a mile sprint, a timed mile sprint. So there's all these different elements that so interested me, because it wasn't what I wanted to do. And eventually I was just, absolutely totally into it. I've got medals over there, and I got into the half marathon, and then they were all doing the Paris marathon, and I trained for that. And we're really not talking about carnivore at the moment. I do apologize for people that wasn't expecting. We'll get to carnivore. But, and I remember,
it's all part of the journey, isn't it?
It is part of the journey, literally. And that's a nice segue into the fact that when I did the training, obviously to train for a marathon, you have got to run a longer distance than a half marathon, which I was pretty quick at. When I got to 18 miles in the training, I can remember being reasonably placed within the training group. There was a fair number of us, and this is really bad. I can't remember her name, but the wife of Jeff's wife came up and said, "You're going too fast." And I actually went, "I don't want to go any slower, and I don't think I want to do 26 miles," which I regret to this day, because they all went off and competed in Paris and did the Paris Marathon. And I was, I think, one of the few people in the group that didn't do it. But I went with my gut. I just didn't really enjoy it. It was just too hard. Like you say, too lonely, definitely too lonely. And it got to the point where I just stopped enjoying it. So I stopped running, and then I noticed that I'd been nursing a knee injury. So at night, as you do things and it becomes gradual, you just think it's age. But my knee would get red hot and I would not be able to sleep and stuff like that. And because I'm into rehab, I realized that I was ruining my knees, and it was just too much on the road, and it was too much distance and too much for my body, really. So I stopped doing that, and then I went back to gym training, which I really enjoy. but I'm now got into walking, and actually I prefer that for my sort of biomechanics and my incidental exercise. Getting out early in the morning is fantastic. Getting early morning sun, getting out into nature, and the 7:30 thing. I mean, I get that. I love being out and walking, and I do about, I don't know, 5 to 8 miles every day, pretty much. So I like that sort of thing. But that, strangely enough, has gone back to being quite solitary, because I'm going out and I'm doing my own thing and finding footpaths and stuff. But I do love it. But as you were talking there, it triggers a little bit of interest in maybe joining a local running club and seeing my progression 15 years on fueled this way, because I think this way I definitely would be better with the endurance, definitely, because I think I'm fat adapted after 4 years of carnivore. Be a bit worried if I'm not.
Just a bit, yeah.
But we're talking about something that I talk about ever such a lot, about what's called cross cancelling. If people want to grow muscle and then they do lots of cardio, they lose muscle and their bones get lighter. And you've just pretty much touched on that, because I think you said you've lost about 20 pounds and you definitely look a little bit smaller. So does that bother you?
Yes, it does. It does. Although what I was described as recently was just a smaller version of myself. So I've gone from, and I think the exact words were, looking like He-Man to Action Man. So I'll take Action Man. I've got an in-body composition machine within the shop, and it's meant to be 1%, within 1% of accuracy to a DEXA scan. And it says that since I've come away from the bodybuilding, and this was training twice a day some days, you don't have to train twice a day, I was just obsessed. I've only lost 2 kilograms of dry protein. Now, when you look at that, so basically at this time of the year, I'd be carrying a lot more fat. I'd still have abs and I'd still have a very low body fat percentage. But I think most of that weight that I've lost is fluid. It's volume in the muscle. And the reason I think that is, following an operation that I had about 2 years ago, I was unable to train for 2 months, and my clothes became baggy. I'd lost all my shape and size. Within 2 weeks of training back again, I was back to the size and strength that I was prior to that. Now, you can't build muscle that quickly, which means that I couldn't have lost the muscle at all. So in 2 months of not training whatsoever, I didn't lose any muscle. I just lost volume in the muscle. And I think that's what's happening now, because my legs are a little bit bigger from the cycling in particular. But if I was to, I still train weights, but instead of doing every day or 5 or 6 times a week, I'm lucky if I hit it twice a week at the moment. But when I get to the gym and start lifting, everything starts to lump and bump, and the veins come out and the striations are there. And in a vest, it still looks fairly good. So I don't think that I've lost the muscle, or as much muscle as 28 to 40 pounds would suggest. I think it's more to do with the volume. But yeah, it does bother me. I used to suffer severely with anxiety and depression, and I would not leave my house. That's how severe it used to be. So I would, and we touched base on this, didn't we, in the podcast we done recently, that I would leave my box, jump into my metal box outside the house. I would drive to a big box, and I'd walk into a little box within that big box, do my work, and do the same and drive home. So my life was spent living in boxes. And now it isn't. I'm living life outside the box, but training and competing give me a little bit more confidence. I'm still not a super confident person, but I do have a lot more confidence than I used to. And it's confidence in myself, knowing that you can achieve anything that you want to achieve. With the right information and dedication, you can achieve anything that you want to. And I genuinely believe that. Yes, we are genetically predispositioned in certain ways, but I think we can manipulate our genes through epigenetics. We can flick on different sets of genes to be fit and healthy, and we can push the boundaries of what we believe our body to be capable of. And that is why I continue to live this lifestyle. This is why I live a carnivore lifestyle. And this is why I promote it. This is why I promote all forms of low carb and being ketogenic for these health benefits and the things that it's allowed me to achieve. But yeah, it does bother me.
Yeah, no, so there will be people asking then, right? What do you actually mean? You've lost volumes. What actual physical matter? What stuff have you lost? Are you saying water that's plumping up the muscles? What are you saying basically?
Yeah, so I believe that it's a combination of water and creatine. I used to supplement with creatine. Creatine is incredible, not just for building muscle, it's brilliant for the brain. Take a look at some of the studies investigating creatine and the effects on the neurons in the brain. It makes you smarter. You wouldn't think it listening to me, but it's incredible stuff for health. Creatine is found in red meats in high amounts. But I used to supplement with it anyway, and that would gain anywhere between 5 to 7 pounds of water within my frame. So it would hold water, but creatine fuels the PC system, the phosphocreatine energy system. So these are the explosive movements. Doing endurance runs, I don't need that explosive movement. I did keep the creatine in for a while, but it was making the muscles in my back incredibly tight. So I gravitated away from the creatine. But yeah, it's volume, as in water, in particular, I believe, and glycogen, because despite not consuming carbohydrates, as keto athletes, we can still add muscle glycogen to the muscle. So we don't need carbohydrates to create glycogen. As a keto adapted athlete, our bodies have the ability to upregulate the lactic acid system, and it will shuttle lactate in the muscle. So where other athletes will be feeling that burn, you've probably noticed this in your longer walks where you don't become fatigued in the legs, you don't get that lactic acid burn. It just gets to a point where you can't walk any further. And the reason is that our body's ability is upregulated to buffer these hydrogen ions, to buffer the lactate, and it'll shuttle the lactate to the liver, recycle it as glycogen, and shuttle it back to the muscle where it's needed. Obviously, if I'm not training my upper body as much, then there's going to be considerably less volume in water, glycogen, and creatine, because creatine will pull the water in. And this is probably why I've noticed that my legs are a little bit bigger. I don't have big legs anyway. The muscle in my legs, believe it or not, is quite a lot, but the physical size is quite small. So it's quite funny. A friend of mine who is a powerlifter has got tree trunks for legs. His legs dwarf mine. They are literally 3 times the size. Yet on the in-body machine, we had almost identical levels of muscle within the leg. It's just mine must be more condensed and packing less fat, and his is covered with more fat. But my legs have definitely gone a little bit bigger, but the upper body has shrunk a little bit. But it's fit for purpose. I'm no longer lifting heavy weights, or to the capacity or the degree that I was previously. So I want to prove something in a different area, and the only way to prove it is to do it myself and to show people that you can live in this lifestyle. It is the healthiest way to live, and because we are healthy, because we are devoid of all these anti-nutrients that others consume, our bodies will heal and repair quicker, and it will upregulate systems and enzymes within the body and allow us to outperform ourselves as a carbohydrate athlete. But how's that?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I mean, don't forget, I don't have to ask all the questions. You can ask me anything, but I think what you're saying about having to prove things is really interesting, because when I started with the diabetic side of things and I had diabetic clients, I was always into this thing, which I'm going to try and talk about a lot more, which is objective truth, because they would say, well, look, it says this in the paper. It says that porridge, or oatmeal, as you call it in America, if there's any Americans watching, is great for you. And I said, well, that's what they're telling you. But then look through the paper and see if, Quaker Oats have got an advert in there. You've got to think, why is this newspaper saying this? Where's the funding coming from? But the easiest thing you can do is you can prove it. You can do objective truth. You can eat this food and you can do the blood glucose monitor. And then you can come back to me and say, wow, you know, that oatmeal that's supposed to be good for my blood glucose, it wasn't. So that's the thing. So you prove it in some ways, but I think the carnivore space is trying to get people to realize that there's so much misinformation out there about the mainstream way of thinking about nutrition. But the thing is, we can actually prove it's BS, basically. And that's always been the driving force when I started with the diabetes was, right, okay, I can tell you the sort of things that you're being told are not true. The certain foods, the biggest lies I heard, and I will call them lies because that's what they were, was many diabetics thought that when they wake up, their blood sugar would be low because that's what they've been told, and they have to eat first thing because their blood sugar would be low. And I said, well, that's the first thing. You can get the objective truth about that once you've got your blood glucose monitor, which, by the way, when they were first invented, there was a big push by the medical authorities to not let members of the public have them. There was definitely we don't want this in the hands of non-professionals type arguments. But anyway, they got into the hands of the non-professionals, and of course, lo and behold, they wake up in the morning, and the biggest thing they're worried about is how much of a blood glucose spike they've got, rather than the dreaded low blood sugar. So that was the first thing. And secondly was all this list of foods. You know, I could get a leaflet out and say, right, which ones do you like? Well, I've acquired a love of bananas or whatever. So they tick all these different things that they were recommended to eat. And I said, I strongly recommend you test these foods. And then you can have the truth. All right. I can tell you what I think from experience, but why not test it on your own self? And therefore, you haven't got to be convinced by me. You can look at your own blood and your actual blood glucose response, and then you can make a decision. Now, believe it or not, even with all that evidence, the power of a white coat or an official document or a leaflet or an association beat their own experience, their own objective truth. It was heartbreaking, actually. And then I would, I would say, we'll have a look on YouTube. There's people doing experiments. There's what's beating diabetes or something, like a Christian guy. He's fantastic, and he just does loads of these tests with glucose monitors, and his wife, and they're absolutely brilliant, and millions of followers now, I think, and it's just interesting that we constantly need to prove, and that's because the other side just push so much misinformation, and they don't have to prove it because they've got the bucks, they've got the money, they've got the advertising, they've got the media sewn up. So I saw a fantastic thing in the week with Ken Berry and is it Nina who wrote The Big Fat Surprise, and they were talking about school lunches, how it is basically cookies and potato chips. That's basically what because the food industry has permeated that spot and just soaked up all the business, because it's just business, it's just money, and it's really frustrating because the children are suffering because it's all about money. It's not about objective truth. And you've only got to look at how the kids are getting non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and all the things that are going wrong, diabetes going through the roof, obesity going through the roof. And it's ever since we've had these ridiculous food guidelines. So anyway, yes. So going back to training, as you sorry about that, but it is interesting that we try to prove things. And I also try to disprove things. I think that's actually the scientific method. You think of a theory and you think, right, is this real? I'm going to go out of my way to disprove this is real by actually doing it. So I did an experiment when I heard that you could not train for 8 months. And if you trained for 8 months at 1/9 of your volume and intensity, you'd retain all of your gains. So I was just interested in this, whether that was true or not. And it was a pretty good study and biopsies of muscles and stuff like that. And I actually stopped training back in August and started back this month. So at the end of August, I stopped training, and I did 8 months and started back in May. And what you just said is very interesting, because within 2 weeks of training in May, wow, I just thought, this is amazing, because the shirts that I was wearing back. So in that 8 months, I would say I didn't like how I looked. definitely didn't feel good. You know, didn't have the bicep definition that I wanted. But what we're nearly the second week of May, just training, no extra training, just training like I used to train. And wow, I just feel like by the end of May, I'll be back where I was. So that did surprise me, this big 8-month gap. I thought this would be horrendous. I thought, wow, I'm going to really struggle and my strength will go down. So I didn't even do the 1/9 thing. I did complete stop, just not training at all. I'm not recommending this, by the way. I'm just saying. And actually, at 59, I think my days of experimenting that drastically are probably behind me. I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't enjoy not feeling particularly sharp and, you know, feeling a bit soft and flabby and all that sort of stuff. But it also proved to me that even later in life, you can come back to it. And I'm convinced, actually, from coaching clients, people who've never trained, you know, it's never too late to get in there and start. And that also is an objective truth, because the media leads you to believe that as you get older, you might as well give up. You know, that's it. When you get to 50, it's really hard to lose belly fat. It's really hard to change your diseases. So basically manage them rather than try to reverse them. It's crazy, I think.
But I think that is typical if you are on a high carbohydrate lifestyle. Carbohydrates damage our mitochondria. They alter something called the NAD+ to NADH ratio, which is we need NAD+ and NADH. It's part of the electron transport chain. It's part of how we create energy, and we deplete this NAD+ ratio, and it declines with age. And that's what leads to oxidative stress. It's almost like taking a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. Now, when we process one glucose molecule, it depletes 4. It utilizes or costs the body 4 NAD+ molecules. 1 BHB molecule costs the body 1 NAD+ molecule, therefore increasing the efficiency by 400%. So that's 4 times less damage caused by being carnivore or ketogenic compared to consuming carbohydrate. So these pro athletes that you see in their 20s and retire in their 30s because they're done for, and then they balloon and they become super unfit, it's because of a lifetime of abuse. Professor Tim Noakes is a perfect example. Used to be an elite runner, carb athlete, wrote the book, The Law of Running. He literally told us how to carb load before an event. Despite being super active and running hundreds of miles a week, he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and he was clinically obese. And now he's one of the biggest spokespeople in the world for living a low-carb ketogenic lifestyle. I think there's a video on YouTube of him ripping out those pages in that book called The Law of Running. So this is someone that's been wedded to that belief for a long time. But so I believe that if you are to consume, now I'm not anti-carbohydrate. Many people think because of what I do that I'm against carbs completely. And it's not the case. I'm in pursuit for optimal health. I'm in pursuit for optimal nutrition. And I want to be the best version that I can be. I want to be as fit and as healthy as I can. I want to be able to be as strong as I can while being as fast as I can and live as long as I can. And that's why my journey has taken me into the route of carnivore, because I used to believe my spinach smoothies with turmeric and black pepper were good for me. And yes, I was considerably fitter and healthy. I'd lost 107 pounds. I'd reversed my diabetes. But I was healthy in spite of and not because of. Now, further down that rabbit hole, we become more educated. We learn about these phytoalexins, these plant toxins, and I begin to remove these, and I become fitter and healthier again. So I'm not, I don't dislike vegans. I work with lots of vegans. I respect their opinions. I think most of them are uneducated in regards to why they are vegan. And I think when you show them the truth, it does open a lot of eyes for those who are willing to listen. But no, I would, if I believed that optimal health was through eating a plant and nothing else, I would be a vegan tomorrow, because I want to be fit and healthy. So I'm not wedded to this keto lifestyle. I'm not wedded to being carnivore. I'm wedded to maximizing my health and well-being. And that's where my journey has taken me, and it's taken me down the road of removing these carbohydrates, because excess carbohydrates causes oxidative damage. It leads to insulin resistance and inflammation. So coming back to a point you made earlier, and I just pulled it up on my other screen there now, an email that I've received recently from a client of mine. He's a veterinarian. He'd recently completed, I'm going to read this, he finished the marathon. He recently ran London Marathon. He completed the marathon in 2 hours, 55 minutes.
Wow.
So incredibly quickly. And wow. He goes on to say, not forgetting, I am 63 years old.
Woo!
So this gentleman is 63 and has just run considerably quicker than I will ever be able to run in my life. So age is just a number. And living this lifestyle devoid of these anti-nutrients and these compounds that are causing oxidative stress, glycation, inflammation, leads us to being able to improve our health and well-being much later into life. And I genuinely believe that. So I'm nearly 40. So a little bit to catch you up yet, but I genuinely believe that when I'm 50, I will be fitter than I am now. And I genuinely believe leading well into my 50s and even my 60s, I will continue to improve my health and well-being, because I am now the fittest and healthiest that I've ever been. And every couple of weeks, a perfect example, I ran today, 40, 52, a similar course at a similar elevation 2 weeks ago was 42, 40 something. So I took 2 minutes off a 10K time. That is incredible. That's a massive percentage on a 10K run. You know, so it's not going to be long before I'm breaking that sub 40 and knocking into the mid 30s, maybe, you know, eventually. But I'm not fit. And this is a conversation. I'm not fit. So my VO2 max isn't brilliant. If you look at my Garmin, so coming back to the stats thing that you said, oh, you'd be addicted to the stats. I am addicted to the stats. After a run or a workout, I'm straight on there looking at my segments and my splits and everything else. And it is super addictive. But what I've noticed, and I've just completely lost my train of thought again then when I mentioned the segments. Brain fog from all this running, I think.
Yeah, you see, it's got you because you've been running so much. Your energy's down, I think. But yeah, just I'm going to answer Oggy. I think it's Oggy. So that's possibly someone from Wales, I think, has asked a question there. Have you ever used the Olympic rings? Or gym rings. I'm going to start. I'll answer that, and then if your thing you were saying comes back into your head, then do that. But, yeah. So I got into the Olympic rings. I call them Olympic rings, but basically the gym rings. And where I used to train, I can't do it here, but we had a squat rack machine, and I could hang them from there. There was enough space to actually use the rings, and I would do L sits, which is basically you get into the ring, you hold it like that, and then you bring your feet up in front of you. And I really got into that sort of thing, and then doing the gymnastic stuff. And I think that's the thing. And I'm guessing Richard's got the same sort of personality. When you start to do something, I think we've got the same personality where you want to push the boundaries and see what you can do. I really enjoyed it for a bit, but then I found I was limited by the room space. So that's one of the things, some of the things I really wanted to do, I couldn't do because of the mechanics of having the ring. And then, like, for instance, doing a pull-up, you need a lot of space because otherwise your feet are still on the floor and all that sort of stuff. So, I really did enjoy them. But one of the things that I think Richard was touching on there is strength over size. It didn't really give me any size. It wasn't actually making me look better, for want of a better description, but I definitely felt stronger, and I felt quite confident in what I was doing. And then when for instance, when we moved from that house to here, stuff that I would never have picked up in my 40s, and don't forget I had lower back pains, and I was told I'd be in a wheelchair by the time I'm 50 when I was in my 20s, so I was always a little bit reticent. Stuff that I wouldn't have picked up, I could pick up really easily, and I put that down to doing things like the rings, which gives the body just more overall strength. Actually, the whole kinetic chain is working. There's so many. It's not stable. So if you're doing a squat, for instance, and then you do a squat on an unstable surface, wow, the difference in your body's response, your physiological response, a training response is probably better, is incredible. And I think that's the great thing with the rings compared to like a bar, which is stable. The rings are constantly, your core muscles, everything is just working to keep you stable. So yeah, I really loved using them, really did. But I think it's not necessarily a bodybuilding tool, it's more a strength tool, I think. What about you? Did you use them?
Yeah, I have them in the gym. In fact, it's right in front of me there, because this is at the back of the wall. I've got an entire gym on the upstairs of my shop, a private gym. So nobody else uses it but me. Equipment that I've acquired over the years, because coming back to that anxiety and depression, I wouldn't go to a local gym for a long time. And I've got rings on there. And I used to do the same things as you, those L-sit type things. And that's about as far as I went with it, because it wasn't one for building size. At least it didn't seem to. It did help with strength and build the stabilizer muscles. But there was other things that I found a lot better for building size. But my little girl uses them an awful lot. She's constantly swinging on them. But yeah, Snap, same as you. I used to use them for basically core work, just for lifting the legs up to up to level and popping them back down. But as you were speaking, that it did pop back into my head in regards to that Garmin tracking. Now on Garmin, it tracks all of your stats, your heart rate variability, amongst other things. And it gives you your estimated 5K time, 10K time, half marathon time, etc. And that's based on your heart rate and your VO2 max and various other things that I don't understand how it works it out. But it basically tells me that I'm capable at my best of achieving a 23-minute 5K. Now, I've already achieved a sub-19 5K. So that's 4 minutes quicker than my Garmin is telling me that my body is capable of achieving. Now, I believe that is possible. I may be wrong. If anybody knows the answer to this, let us know. I'd love to know. But I think it's because of our lifestyle. My body has the ability to upregulate systems and enzymes within the body, and allows me to perform at a higher level. As my VO2 increases from my time running and cycling, I think that's going to increase further. So I just think living this lifestyle is allowing me to perform well above what my stats are basically saying that I'm capable of. And again, not setting the world on fire by any means, but the fact that it's come on so quick it must turn heads, surely. I work with people who've been running all their life and never achieved a sub 25K. So, and I'm not built for running. And just touching base on something else you said earlier in regards to, you've only got to look outside to see what's going on in the world in regards to health and well-being. Almost everybody you see on the high street is insulin resistant. They all have this central adiposity. Yet, as a people, we are actively trying to eat healthier. We're consuming our whole grains. We're consuming our seed oils, avoiding our saturated fats. We're avoiding red meat. We're not over-consuming sodium, yet we are the sickest we have ever been. Diabetes is through the roof, insulin resistance, cancers, all sorts of through the roof. Yet people seem blinkered. They're almost blinded by the media, as you say, white coat syndrome, isn't it? They see somebody in a white coat and just believe that everything that they say is accurate. And I was working with a gentleman recently who went to see 2 different doctors, specialists in their field, and they both give this client of mine complete opposite advice. One I believe to be correct, and the other one I believe not to be. And he couldn't understand how 2 doctors could give 2 complete versions of the same thing. And again, I think it is driven, unfortunately, by the financials, isn't it? It's just driven by money. But we've only got to take a look outside. Now, when you look at a runner, so my wife pointed this out to me today. She said, there's 2,500 people running here today. I said, yeah. And she said, why are they all overweight? I said, all people, bar the elite few at the front, who were, a stick thin. Even the people, and she said, this gentleman overtook me who was 4 times my size. obviously he's been running a long time, so he's fit, but he's not healthy. And the reason being is the overconsumption of these carbohydrates, particularly from these grains, and the overconsumption of seed oils is leading to this insulin resistance, this whole hypothesis of carb loading, getting this carbs in. What do you need energy for? You're only running 10K. We have 150, even the leanest person you know carries 150,000 kilojoules of energy on their body with a 6% body fat. You have all the energy you need. You don't need the carb load as if you're running a marathon. You know, when you're running a 10K, you don't even need the carb load for a marathon. But that's a topic for another day, I guess. But that is exactly it. They put in the carb load in, they increase in this insulin. And when we increase insulin upregulates an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, which breaks the bonds on the glycerol backbone and signals the body to store fat. Insulin tells the body to store fat. And when insulin is elevated, it blocks hormone-sensitive lipase, which is the hormone that we need to perform this in reverse and break the bonds on the glycerol backbone and allow these fatty acids to diffuse in the bloodstream in order for us to lose weight and burn fat for fuel. But while insulin is elevated, insulin puts this biological lock in our fat stores, making it impossible to burn. So irrespective of caloric value, when insulin is elevated, your body is in fat storage mode, and it is impossible to burn fat when insulin is elevated, regardless of calories. It is not the calories that govern whether we gain or lose weight. It's the effect on the endocrine system. It's the thermic effect of food, ketogenesis, and metabolic rate. These four things govern whether we gain or lose weight. And I like it.
You see, the thing is, this medical.
Is that for painting the ceiling?
I used to, when I was a PT, I would actually say that what you just said, Richard, and there's no other highlights in this book apart from this, which is all about when they first came to me for personal training. We talk about nutrition, and they say, "Oh no, I just want to do the exercise to lose the weight," and I would talk about insulin. And basically, all aspects of fat metabolism are greatly enhanced in the absence of insulin. I mean, it says it. It's all about the insulin, right? And there are screenshots of this book on my website, Guyton's Medical Physiology textbook, and we know that insulin is the problem.
Insulin is the problem.
We definitely know that. Can I just try something? So we got another question. Can you see the question in the comments?
I can't see. In fact, there is a tab for comments. Let me see if I can. Yes, I can see comments.
Yeah. Okay. Love your video on mass in, mass out, fat metabolisms to CO2 and H2. Yeah, but right. Yes. So that's all about my talk about calories. Okay. But I've just found something. I'm quite new to live streaming, so this might not work, Richard, but it's my stats from when I used to run, if you're interested.
Fire away.
I think if I press that and I go to screen share, let me just have a look. I might be able to give you my stats if you're interested.
Fire away.
Yeah. Let's put that in. So yes, right. I'm not proud of these stats. I just think it's just as a yardstick for you. I wanted to show, you see, the mile sprint we used to do, we did that 109 times. And my fastest time was 6 minutes 56. So I'd sprint for a mile. Now, I'm not saying that's really fast. I'm just saying that these were the sort of performance levels I got to. And where's my 5K? You just run a 5K. Did you just run a 5 or a 10? I can't remember what you said.
10. 10 today.
So I got to 22, and then 10K was 47. I think that was as good as I could get. So I just wanted to show you that. I wasn't fantastic, but I was, I was consistent, and we were running all the time. But the thing I enjoyed the most was that mile sprint. So I did that 109 times.
I can see that.
I just absolutely loved it. And I like what you just said about the insulin there, because that was brilliant. My past, and I really don't talk about this very much because I think it's uninteresting, but I was a spin instructor in a gym. Now, the group that used to come in to do my spin class worked their socks off. They really did. All right. They were mainly women. There's a couple of guys. And in the week, we tended to do spin a couple of times a week. We'd also do a circuit class, and we'd also do boxing, boxercise sort of thing. But it was the boxing was quite.
Oh, I think you've dipped out there, Stephen. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me, Stephen, but it's you've frozen on your end, unless it's me. all seems to be working my end though. Oh, still frozen. And it was just me. Let's see if Stephen joins back on. Just drop him a quick message. Technology, eh? No joy. Come on, Stephen. Yes, indeed. Ah, here he comes.
Hello.
Back once again with the Renegade Master. You okay?
Yeah, we
All
just
good?
had Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
We had
all good?
we had a power outage. Absolutely
Oh,
everything was dark. Would
Need
you
to
say?
pedal faster?
Yeah, yeah. Hey, that's a good idea, isn't it? John's low carb life, bit awkward. Yeah, it was very awkward. I've never had that.
Yes.
It's completely black. But
No
I'm
worries.
sure,
It happens.
sure you were brilliant and held the fort there fantastically.
Yeah, not so well. I was trying to call you, to be honest, but I can see the comments on the other side. I obviously talk until he was back, but yeah, I should have just rabbited on. I think I do enough
That's all right.
of a good job by myself talking. So.
That's okay. That's
Never
okay.
mind.
Yeah. So I don't know what you were saying about me. I'm sure it was all lovely.
Oh, I can't tell you anything.
Someone's asked, are you OMAD or 2MAD?
Me?
Gosh.
It depends. I eat when I'm hungry. If I'm not hungry, I don't eat. There's a bit of feedback your end, Stephen. I don't know if I'm going to turn the speaker down a little bit.
Yeah, is that better?
There's no, still there. I'll carry on anyway. But yeah, I generally eat 2 meals a day. But that's because yeah, I'm hungry. If I'm not hungry, I don't eat. But I'm happy just to eat once a day, providing my body feels satiated. And it's important. Protein needs to be prioritized. Protein is the most important macronutrient. It contains every vitamin and mineral that we need, not just to survive, but thrive. Yes, fat is super important. Protein and fat, both super important, but fat comes with protein in nature. So as long as you're eating natural proteins, you are consuming natural fats. An egg, for example, contains almost equal amounts of protein to fat, roughly 6 grams of protein, 5 grams of fat. A piece of steak, a fatty cut of steak, is roughly the same. Salmon is protein and fat. And then we have chicken breast with the skin on. So nature gives us this perfectly packaged present that contains protein and fat together. So if you prioritize your protein, you will be consuming plenty of fat. Fat is driven as being the key macronutrient when you're ketogenic. Now, this is a fallacy. Yes, fat is important. Every cell in the body is made of fat. But if you eat as nature intended, then you will get plenty of fat. We don't need to add fat to everything. There's nothing wrong with doing this, but it obviously depends on what your goals are. Many people will stall through the overconsumption of fats, but protein is the most important. So I make sure that I hit around 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. I don't track. It comes intuitively from a long time of living a keto carnivore lifestyle. So I just listen to my body. So it's either 1 or 2 meals a day. I generally don't snack. If I do, it'll be eggs or cheese. We do these pork crackling, which are rusk-free, so they're lectin-free pork cracklings. I'll eat those occasionally, and we make almond brownies as well, which have had the rusk removed, husk removed from that as well. So those are lectin-free. But again, not very often. I don't snack. I just tend to eat lots. In fact, I had food just before we came on. I should have kept it here, shouldn't I? So you could see what I eat. But it's a lot of food, and my body fat percentage is less than 10%. And I don't diet. I don't restrict. I just listen to my body. Now, this is one of the reasons that many people will suffer with hair loss when they live a keto carnivore lifestyle. Like it? Yes, perfect. I'm hungry again now. I might eat it 3 times today. Many people will restrict because they are fasting. That's all you've eaten today? Yeah, lovely. Perfect. Proper carnivore meal. So I find with a lot of people that I work with, if they are fasting and only consuming 1 meal a day, sometimes it will lead to health issues such as hair loss and things, because we need lots of proteins, we need B vitamins, we need lots of fat for bile production and the utilization of our fat soluble vitamins. So if you are suffering with hair loss and fatigue and things, then it is worth consuming a little bit more. If you don't and you feel great and you're benefiting from autophagy, then continue with 1 meal a day. Just listen to your body. You don't need to live in this box every day. You don't need just to eat 1 meal every day. You can eat 2 or 3 times a day. But when you listen to your body, your body will tell you when you are satiated. It will tell you when you are full. It will tell you when you need to consume food. So, yeah. So the short answer is yes, I eat OMAD, but I also do too mad. I am mad.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, it's a good question, and I don't know if they're asking you, Richard, or me. So I'll answer. And the reason I showed you that video is because I've done 2 mad today, but I'm exactly the same as Richard. The problem is I don't want this to be like an echo chamber, but we're very like-minded, which is why I asked him on. But he's more into the science and I'm more into sort of like trying to make it as basic as possible. And I think that might work for everybody watching.
Well, that's what works well, I think, isn't it? That's what works well.
Yeah. And I think so. I would answer the same. I'm quite intuitive. I don't think today I'm going to be OMAD. Today I'm going to be too mad. But you end up in a pattern because your body does tend to get used to it, and it does depend on your activity and what you're going to do. I mentioned earlier about my sort of experiment of not training and feel a bit puffy. So Monday and Tuesday, I'm not eating. Now, I don't fast much, but today I feasted. So I've had 2 meals per day today. I had a whole lamb joint, which you just saw, and 2 bits of chicken with skin on. Don't add fats, exactly the same thing. Most things that we eat are a perfect ratio. Yes, there's lots of individuality to that. So you might need the extra fat, for instance, if you've been 20 years low fat and calorie restricted or whatever, you might need that extra fat when you first come over because your body's crying out for it. But I think once you get into sort of healing and everything's working, then just whole foods is about the best thing you can do. So I tend to end up being TOMAD or OMAD. That's just the way it is. I'm not a snack sort of person. But I think you need to be flexible. So if you worked out really hard, you went for a long walk, you're really, really stressed, you didn't sleep very well, all of those things are going to change your hunger signals. And also if you're still dabbling with like artificial sweeteners, if you haven't taken the seed oils out of your life, there's so many things to do. But one thing I would say is try not to be prescriptive, try to be intuitive. That's the thing. Some people I know, they just can't give up on tracking. They can't give up on numbers. They can't give up on guidance. And I just did a coaching session before this live thing. And, you know, they went through a process. I'm not going to give too much information away. And it absolutely backfired on them because they were not listening to their body. They were going over and above on their fat intake and they started to gain weight. Their body composition wasn't particularly good. And I said, that's because someone's told you that you need X amount of fat. Your body told you. As soon as your belt didn't fit properly or your blouse was too tight, that's when you listen to you. And you say, right, this isn't working out for me. And I know that person is 100% strict carnivore. So that was just listening to, you know, the noise out there about X amount of fat. And yes, you can do the rule of thumb equation is good. Yes, 1 gram of protein, 1 gram of fat per 1 pound of lean body mass is a starting point. You see, now if someone's 400 pounds, that might be different to someone that's coming to this 180 pounds and wants to lose 10 pounds, and the 400-pound person wants to use 240. So it's all very, very different. If you've got this overplus of energy and you're 400 pounds, you can afford to probably fast because you've got this storage that you want to get rid of. But so there's loads of different ways of working it. But yeah, good question, because that's what everyone wants to know. How often do you eat? But don't forget, if someone says I'm OMAD, you then need to think, well, how much are you eating? You know, because you could be OMAD and under eating. You could be TOMAD and under eating, you know, and so use that as a silly example. Someone doing TOMAD could be under eating. Someone on OMAD could be overeating. So it is not just how frequently you're eating, but also how much, and also the quality of what you're eating is, you know, is a big factor. And don't forget, again, there's going to be a big difference between something like chicken and pork, how full you feel and all that sort of stuff. So it is a good question, but I think sometimes you need to go into a little bit more detail than just those things. So anyway, yeah, I think we've answered that really fully. And I want to apologize there. We did have a blackout, by the way. I just texted my wife to see if it happened downstairs, and it was the whole house. So we don't know what that was about. But I was worried because she's been out in the garden working on the electrics. So she might walk in with hair frizzing out and smoke coming off of there. But anyway, so I'm a bit more relaxed now. Yes. So I thought we might have more questions, but we haven't actually. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on, Richard?
Do you know, there's so much that we could cover. I think we've probably gone off on a tangent on athletic performance, isn't it? Yes, I compete, but I work with people with the majority of the clients I work with is health-based, and that's why I got into this space. I don't work solely with athletes. They make up a very small portion of my customer base, but this is for health. So sometimes I dislike going down that whole athletic route because it's easy to become pigeonholed. But this is about health, isn't it? And one of the other questions I can see up there now is that what is it? I'm reading Dr. Peter Attia's book. He says that strength trumps VO2. Yeah, I believe it does. Strength. This is why I continue to train strength. But when you can't run 1.5K there are issues there. I think we need a happy medium. I'll never stop strength training. I'm still fairly strong. I believe I haven't lost an awful lot of strength. Muscle mass is incredibly important, but then, obviously we can take it to an extremity as well, with the likes of the Mr. Olympias, isn't it? Where in America, the average lifespan of a bodybuilder in the States is 12 years less, I believe, than the average American. So it just goes to show that living the lifestyle of consuming considerable amounts of carbohydrates is not healthy. Many will put this down to the supplementation they're using. I'm not completely convinced on that. I haven't done an awful lot of research into supplementation, but I have delved a little bit. But I don't believe that is the root cause. I mean, a lot of it comes down to cholesterol profile and things, and we know that what we're told about cholesterol is a misinformation anyway. So I do question that. But what do we know? That excess carbohydrates causes all of these implications. It lowers that NAD plus to NADH ratio, causes this glycation, inflammation, oxidative stress, insulin resistance. And what does the average bodybuilder do? Well, they consume carbohydrates every 2 hours, lots of them. They're in this constant activation of mTOR, which is a growth signaling pathway. Our bodies need to be in autophagy. We need to be activated AMPK. We can't be in growth phase all the time. And this is why I believe that they struggle with life expectancy. But yeah, for sure, strength training is very important. Highly recommend. I think everybody should be lifting weights. And I'm not talking 165k bench presses and if that's what you want to do, that's fantastic. I've moved away from the top lifts because you can achieve all of the benefits from lifting much lighter weights and concentrating on eccentric movements, concentrating on the power coming down while exploding up rather than the other way. This will increase the body's ability to grow mass a lot more efficiently, and timing is very important. You don't need to spend hours in the gym. Also, 45 minutes and around 12 to 16 sets is probably optimal. And this is why a friend of mine, Alan Reeves, you may know him from some of the podcasts that I've done. We've got a podcast series together. He's also a bodybuilding champion for men's physique, the same category as me, but he competed before I did. He is, I want to say an ex-Chippendale. It's not Chippendale. It's one of those, though, sort of fantastic. But he's in the shape of his life. This guy has just turned 50, and he is ripped and shredded to the bone. And I was shocked when he told me recently that he only trains 3 to 4 times a week, 45 minutes, and that's it. So just goes to show you don't need to spend 2 hours in the gym and train twice a day. But yes, I agree. Strength training is super important, but balance, I believe, is important as well. And I just want to improve that side of my health in regards to the VO2 max.
I think that's one of the things I want to echo, is that I think overtraining is not needed. I don't train that often, 4 to 5 times a week. And I was doing 15-minute sessions when I started the X3, for instance. And in that year, when I experimented with the X3, that was the most gains I've ever had. I had gained 9 pounds of muscle with the X3. So I was really impressed with that. But I will get into the nuance of that. But I was using a bioimpedance machine, electrical impedance machine. So it's not an exact science, but it gives me an idea. And anyway, people were saying, wow, your biceps look good and all this sort of stuff. So it worked. And I've lost a bit of that because of, like I said, this 8-month delay. There is a question here. I can give my little 2-penneth answer to David there. If you've got time, Richard, then you can
fire away.
And I'll mute my mic because you're worried about the feedback, but I'll do my bit first. So it says, which do you prefer, maximum strength or endurance strength? I'm reading Convict Conditioning, and it's really got me thinking that endurance strength is healthier, but I'm easily swayed. And I think there's probably a little bit more to that question that needs to be addressed. Firstly, when someone comes to me in my personal training role, I say, what is your goal? What do you want to do? Because if someone wants to run 26 miles, then you've got to train them for that. If they want to be strong, then you would train them for that. That's really basic. The other thing is if it's aesthetics, because most people talk about, actually, I want to look good in, in the buff, or, in my, on the beach, those sort of things, then you can say, well, look, if you look at a 100-meter sprinter, which is sort of like a strength endurance type of thing, it's short, explosive movements. That's what a sprinter looks like, and here's what a marathon runner looks like. And they are very spindly, and obviously you've got to think, what does the body do when you start to train it? The training response when you do lots of running for a distance, your body is pretty smart, and it works out, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to make the muscles sort of thin and as small as we possibly can. That's good training, and the bones are going to be as light as possible. And if you're doing the explosive stuff, you want the big, bulky, really fast, explosive muscles, and you want nice, thick, strong bones, because you're putting a lot of pressure on the entire body as you pound down there very quickly in 10 seconds doing 100 meters. The shock through your entire kinetic chain is amazing. So your joints and your bones need to be really big and chunky. So the endurance strength is really interesting, because most people say strength against endurance, which is what I was talking about, the 100 meters against the marathon runner. And that's where people go wrong, because they want to be big and muscly but do loads of cardio, and that's called cross-cancelling. So you don't get the gains that you're after, you don't get the endurance you're after, you get sort of like a middle ground. So I think for me, I would answer that, what do you want out of your training? That would be my first thing. And I think all training and everything you do in life where you're trying to make a difference is got to be goal driven, isn't it? It's got to be, you want something out of it. If you want to be able to speak Chinese, well, then you've got to start studying Chinese, and then you have to do a time limit to make it realistic. Because I think genuinely at 59, if I wanted to speak Chinese, it would probably take me 10 years. Is that going to be relevant? Because in 10 years time, would I need it? Is there any actual practical application? So anyway, I've gone off a bit there. So what do you think is healthier? Is possibly the wrong question, actually. Because I think it's goal driven. You might want to be a certain way of look, or you want to do a certain thing, achieve a certain time in a sport, or lift a certain amount of weight. So I think it needs a little bit more fleshing out. But I'm going to hand over to Richard, because I think he might be able to answer that to your satisfaction.
Yeah, I agree with what you were saying. It depends on the goal. I think the endurance side is probably healthier, but both are incredibly healthy. I work with athletes who train for both. Some are strength, some are endurance. But what I would say in regards to aesthetics is that it's an illusion as well. We want to put this mass on so we look good in a t-shirt, but a lot of this can be achieved through diet. When we adopt a carnivore lifestyle and we're devoid of foods high in lectins, and we're avoiding this insulin secretion continuously, we lose this fat around the midsection, and this makes us look bigger on top. And this is why I used to do so well in competition. I'm only 5'9". I used to compete in an age category, so I used to compete against this gentleman, Stephen, who was 6'2". So he would dwarf me. If I stood behind him, he wouldn't even see me. We competed against each other several times, and he beat me sometimes, and I beat him. Now, when I beat him, I was on song. I was the leanest that I had ever been. My waist was 26 inches, I believe, and it's normally around 30. But my lats were really defined. My delts were really defined. So it gives this illusion of that X frame. So a lot of it is to do with illusion as well. And you can manipulate certain areas on the body, like the sides of the delts and the lats, to give this impression that you are in fact bigger than you are. In regards to building muscle, we need to train. Now, what I found worked best for me was a mixture. So I would concentrate on the most effective, if I had to nail one, was the eccentric movement training, tailored more towards the endurance side, so higher reps. So this would be rep counts of anywhere between 12 and 20 sometimes, but I would concentrate on the eccentric movements, holding and then exploding, rather than just giving it everything that you've got. Now that was designed to, I use that for aesthetic purposes to make me bigger. But when I went back to lifting heavy, I had gained strength. So I believe that to be a good tool for gaining strength also. That said, when I was at my strongest, I was also regularly lifting heavy weights. So again, I think you need to tailor it in regards to what you want to get out of things. But a mixture is pretty good. The only thing that I would say in regards to the heavier training is that you're more prone to injury. When you start lifting heavy, ego gets in the way, and then suddenly you're trying to hit a PB every other week, and then before you know it, you've pulled a pec or you've torn something, and then you're out of action for weeks. And then the depression kicks in, isn't it? Because you can't train. So, you need to be sensible with it. But what I would say is, regardless of what you're doing, prioritize eccentric movements. I'd go for a higher rep range. Certainly when beginning, especially, I think you're going to see more aesthetic gains from that. It will help build strength because you've got a pause at the bottom. So a lot of on the bench press, for example, or it could be when you squat, when you pause in the bottom, you need to be stronger on the concentric. So that helped me improve strength considerably. But as far as nutrition goes, leucine is the miracle amino acid. That is the most anabolic amino acid. We need around 3 grams of leucine to activate mTOR, and leucine will activate mTOR directly, not via IGF-1, which is where we get the insulin for the mTOR activation from through insulin. So when we are told to consume carbohydrates to increase insulin, it's because we want to activate mTOR. But 3 grams of leucine will activate mTOR. So this could be a chicken breast or a steak. Now, the key is not to maintain in this constant activation of mTOR. We want to use something called the mTOR reset. So we activate mTOR, it spikes, we benefit from it. We want to wait 3.5 to 4 hours for it to come back down, eat again, without snacking in between, activate mTOR again. And we can do this up to 4 times in a day. So if you weren't wedded to OMAD or eating 2 meals a day, you could still fast for 12 hours and fit something in between 3.5 to 4 hours, eating 4 times a day, activating mTOR 4 times. There's no need to do it more than 4 times, but you can drop it down to 3 or 2. But this is going to be more mTOR activation than if you were eating continuously every 2 hours, because it's this mTOR reset that's giving us the benefit. So it's not the length that mTOR is activated, it's the amount of times that we can activate it, and leucine is the key. So coming back to carnivore, red meat, jam-packed full of leucine. Leucine is the most anabolic amino acid. When I was training with the weights, I was supplementing with leucine also. I would take leucine before my meal, and I found that this did make a big difference. And creatine is the miracle powder, especially for those power lifts, those explosive movements. So when people say that we need carbohydrates for those explosive movements, it's the PC system that we're utilizing for those 1, 2, or even 8 lifters. We don't even touch glycogen during the PC system. So you don't need carbohydrates to be strong. It's a complete fallacy. So we can be ketogenic, we can utilize creatine. Yeah, I've probably gone off on one there, but does that answer the question, David? But not that he's going to answer straight away,
I think you didn't give enough detail.
No.
But the thing is, I mean, it depends how deep people want to go, and this is one of the things. I wasn't sure if I was talking to you about this, but anyway, I was researching, Dunning-Kruger, the 2 people that looked into the cognitive dissidence and all this sort of stuff, and they said when you first get a bit of knowledge, you're very enthusiastic and actually possibly a bit overconfident when you give your answers, and you've got this little bit of knowledge, but the crowd love it because you've got this confidence. But what they realized when they were studying why people in that situation get a lot of traction is because those people that continue to study and continue to be open-minded realize so much is out there that they don't know. They slightly lose their confidence, and therefore they're not attracting the crowd so much, but their knowledge is better. And it takes a long time, and there's sort of curve. And I think they actually use the word simpleton, which is possibly a bit disingenuous, but you'll get the simpleton with a little bit of knowledge, very confident, has a huge amount of support. And then all these people that continue to study, they lose that confidence and they lose that support until eventually you start to gain so much knowledge, you feel really confident that you can talk at length. And that's when you've been around a long time, but you still are a little bit tempered by, you still don't know everything. That's the thing. And I think this is one of the things that you've now got down to a fine art, Richard, if you don't mind me saying. You know your stuff and you're confident in your stuff, and that's great. And I think people need to know that there is so much more to this than just these glib people coming on and saying you need carbs to exercise, right? And the nuance there is, so if you see somebody on there who's very convincing, saying you've got to have carbohydrates to work out, you've got to. That's actually true. That's true. Your body needs to produce carbohydrates, doesn't need to eat them, and that's the thing. Your body makes them, and that's the nuance that they miss. And I had an example. So yes, in answer to your question, see, we're the same, Richard. In answer to your question, but I think the extra detail is really good. But I will get some really, to be honest, very rude, ignorant, ill-informed comments on my YouTube channel, and they will throw something at me as if that's absolutely true. Like I had one recently, which I did reply to and said, I'm not going to reply to you anymore because firstly, you've insulted me in your comment. You've called me a fool. You've said I've insulted your intelligence, which I didn't. I just gave you some facts. And then they spouted some facts and they said, humans haven't been eating just meat. They've been eating meat and rice and potatoes and fruit and veg for 300,000 years or whatever it was, forever. And he mentioned potatoes. Now, you see, there's no knowledge there because in Europe, they weren't even in Europe until the 1500s, and potatoes were worldwide. So immediately you want to say, well, you need a little bit more knowledge before you spout how ignorant I am, because you've just shown. And that's a perfect example of Dunning-Kruger, really, because their confidence in their replies is full of this brashness, full of rubbish, basically misinformation. You could pick on, honestly, so many different things were said that were absolutely rubbish, and that they also try to belittle you by calling you a name. And I think that's the thing. If you ask a question and Richard gives you the full, the answer and also the mechanism, and then you can go and research that mechanism and see it's been studied.
Exactly, and that's what I encourage. Go and study everything, because don't take my word for things. The more research that I carry out, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. There is so much more out there that I wish that I knew. At every time I look into something, I want to know as deep into that subject as I can. And we can't, because what we cover in regards to being nutritionists is suddenly we need to be on the level of a doctor and a biochemist and a biologist, because now we're talking to people about how the human body works, how we can reverse these illnesses and diseases, how plants work in the body. There's not one person on the planet that is qualified in all of those things, yet we need to have a deep understanding in all of these subjects. I wish that I knew it all, and as I say, the more that I learn, the more I realize that it is to learn. But I do enjoy learning. I love learning, and I love people teaching. Every time I speak to someone such as yourself, I learn something new, and I hope when I speak to people that they learn something new from me too, because that's how we are going to grow, and that's how we are going to work our way down this rabbit hole, this network of warrens of misinformation, and work out what the truths are. What I believed to be correct when I began my ketogenic journey, I no longer believe to be correct. There are some constants. So we know the grains are detrimental, seed oils are detrimental. We know the red meat is actually very good for us. We know the sodium is very good for us. Amongst other things, saturated fat and cholesterol. But I believed that spinach was good for me. I believed the kale was good for me. I don't believe that anymore. Yet, I would have spouted all the evidence to back that up, in regards to the spinach being good for me and everyone else 10, 11, 12 years ago. But somebody give me a piece of information. I looked into that information, and rather than disagreeing and attacking that person and calling that person nasty names, I decided to look into their argument, and now I believe it to be true. And as I say, who knows, maybe next year something else will arise and I'll change my opinion again. But I just can't see that being the case where we are now in regards to the food that we eat. We are eating evolutionary appropriate food. We're eating food that we have consumed our entire existence, food that we have evolved on our entire existence. And we eat food, we consume food that is highly nutrient dense and devoid of all these phytoalexins and plant toxins. So I think where we are now is a pretty good place to be in regards to our nutrition. And I genuinely believe consuming meat and being carnivore, or at least predominantly animal based, is the healthiest way to live. Are there avenues that we can maybe tweak? Is there a place to put carbs in to increase athletic performance? Possibly. I'm open to negotiation. I'm open to experimentation, such as yourself. I perform little tests on my own body because I'm in pursuit of this optimal health and nutrition. It doesn't work for me whenever I put the carbs back in. I hear from other people that it does work, and if it works, then it works for them. I'm constantly looking into the science. The science is highly contradictory, and I need to investigate it a lot more. But I think the only way that I'm going to get to the bottom of this one is through experimenting. So I may, don't shoot me for this, but I may experiment moving forward. I'm going to try to improve as much as I can in regards to the running and cycling. And when I've plateaued for several months, maybe a couple of weeks, I don't like plateauing. I may experiment with implementing white rice, for example, because white rice is lectin free. I believe that to be one of the healthiest forms of carbohydrate. So we'll see. I know I'm going to plateau eventually, but I'm open to experimenting, and we'll see how that goes. And there's another live there, isn't it? There's another podcast that we can touch base on and go into the science and the research in regards to that. But as I say, I'm not anti-carb, and I'm open to the research and experimentation. But I genuinely believe that our way of living, being carnivore, or at least animal based, is the healthiest way to live. So if you are living a carnivore lifestyle, if you were ketogenic, low carb, even dirty keto, I believe to be healthier than living a standard lifestyle, then you are on a path of optimal health and nutrition. And the further we go down this rabbit hole, the more you gravitate into removing these other things that you find that pop up along your journey. I've recently removed coffee, for example. I've always been a big lover of coffee. I've always promoted coffee. Coffee does have benefits. It has lots of benefits, but it also contains a compound called acrylamide. And acrylamide causes inflammation in the body. It causes neuroinflammation, inflammation within the muscle. It can cause intestinal permeability, and it can cause cancer. All coffee beans contain acrylamide, to the point that in California, 7-Eleven and Costco and a few other companies, I believe, I may be wrong with the company names, in 2018, I believe, had to put causes cancer labels on their coffee cups, because all coffee causes cancer. But they went to court and they won their battle, because the local diner didn't need to put this label on their coffee cup. So why should these big companies lose out on business when all coffee contains acrylamide? So I've removed coffee most of the time. I have had a coffee today. I had a coffee because I know coffee is a very good ergogenic aid. It helps with athletic performance. So I had a coffee before the run this morning, and I believe that it helped. But acrylamide is accumulative. If you were not consuming it every day, or 3 or 4 times a day, or 10 times a day like I used to, then that damage is heavily negated. And I believe our bodies have the ability to flush that out of the system, and we won't suffer with those issues. But I can see I gave up coffee when fantastic, perfect. I think that you can still consume coffee. Maybe this is just the addict in me wanting to put it in occasionally, but I've had one coffee in the last 10 days. But I genuinely think that if we consume little and often, that those issues are heavily negated, because again, acrylamide is accumulative. But fantastic, you've given it up. It's highly addictive, and I think it carries lots of nasties. But I've got apologies. I've gone off on one again there. But yeah. So yeah.
So is coffee as bad if you decaffeinate it, or does that mitigate the problem?
No, so decaf coffee is the same. It's in the roasting process that the acrylamide is formed, and it's not just coffee beans. It's any nuts that are roasted. Acrylamide is formed as well. If you Google acrylamide, you'll see that it's a known carcinogen. Yeah, so this is why I've removed it. And again, always looking for. But I would have sworn 6 months ago that coffee was the magic elixir. It's a fat mobilizer. If you take that before a workout, you burn more body fat. If you want to lose weight, take coffee. If you were struggling with mental clarity, yes, ketones supply superior energy to the brain and the body. But if you consume the likes of exogenous ketones with caffeine, this is enhanced further. If you are having a little lull and you put some coffee, down your throat, then it does increase your alertness. So it does have its advantages. But like any drug, drugs can become dangerous when abused. So I think if you are consuming coffee, consume little and not so often, which is what I'm doing. But again, maybe that's an excuse just because I'm addicted.
I think that's a great example of learning as you go. I mean, I have seen thousands of bloods, and I qualified phlebotomist, and I'm pretty proud of what I know about bloods. And then about 2 years ago, when I was looking at the HbA1c being a misleading metric for people that run carnivore because their red blood cells live longer. I thought this was a good theory, and I based it on hemolytic people whose red blood cells die too soon, so you have to ignore the HbA1c because it's artificially low. And I assumed that if the red blood cells lasted longer, therefore you get an artificially high reading, and that does seem to be backed up. But what I was particularly interested in is you can do a blood test to see how long the red blood cells last. You can actually test that as well. So I mean, I didn't know that when I started. I've been doing phlebotomy for longer than that, but 2 years ago when I was really getting the same results from carnivores, because I started when I was 55 doing the carnivore coaching. So it took 2 years for me to realize this trend was happening. And then if you're not open, I'm not giving myself a big up here. I'm just saying, if you're not open to new things, you will never discover new things as well. That's the great thing about being open-minded. You can think something, you can even see experience of it. So, for instance, when you were saying about coffee, you were saying to people, yeah, it's good fat burner and all that. You might have seen lots and lots of results and thought, well, this is it. I mean, we can't prove it was causal, but it seems like they're doing the coffee and they're losing some weight. So maybe there's something to do with that. Then you find out there's a confounder in that, they'll get this and this, these good results, but long term, you might get this really bad result. And that's the informed, because you're open-minded, you found that out. And also that's where the informed choice comes in as well, because I hope people realize that this, but you still had a coffee, but you had it with that knowledge that there was a potential for a bad outcome long term. And I think this is the thing about nutrition science. There's so many people out there saying these glib things that sound bites, or recommending this, recommending that. But and it may even be true. That's the point I'm making. There may be somebody saying, drink coffee, do this, you will lose the body fat that you want, and that happens. So you think this is great advice. 10 years down the line, and they get cancer. Could it have been this overconsumption of coffee? So as long as you can give all the details out to people, and then they make their own informed decision. I think somebody jokingly said, right, that's in the comments, that's it, coffees are off the menu. Well, you see, that's great, isn't it? I mean, you might have actually stopped someone having that long-term, pretty bad side effect, or so I think that's what I try to do, is get I mean, I got you on to do an interview about your background, but then I realized you know, pretty interesting dude and very knowledgeable and think very differently, which I like to do. I like to think differently. And I was hoping, you know, that you would be like you've been. They've given us really full answers. I never do longer than 45 minutes. And I think we've gone an hour and 39 at the moment. So I'm going to wrap up, if you don't mind.
Yes, for sure. No problem at all. I've tried to keep my answers less scientific today because I quite often get collared and abused for giving too scientific answers that people don't understand. But
I think that's what's good about you, because I think you give the answer and also you give the mechanism and the reason why you think that, and that's really good. And I want to try and do these live streams on a regular sort of basis. If you're up for it, I'd like to do that, and maybe have a theme and put it out there. That the theme I had in my head was like objective truth, the thing I spoke about earlier, and maybe we could touch on that again, where people can do the experiments for themselves, and they can. And obviously, I'm not talking about drink coffee for the next 20 years and come back and say you're right. Which is pretty drastic. What I'm saying is, if we start talking about stuff, I'm hoping people will come with questions, and I don't know, they might say, so maybe, you know what? I did 5 meals a day and I lost weight. And well, I want to know about that. Why did that happen? How did that happen? What did you do? So I think that's what I would like anyway.
Yeah, maybe the guys could put some comments in this below. I'm guessing this will be saved on YouTube for future reference.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, if anyone has any other questions, then yeah, we'll make this a regular thing, and we can answer those questions in a little bit more depth rather than going off on a tangent and just winging it. But yeah, this questions welcome by all means. This any question. I don't think there's a question that I haven't been asked. And if I don't know the answer to a question, I will go away and I will research it for you extensively and come back with a good answer for you. But yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, I'm going to throw in a question. Now, I don't know you well enough to get away with this question, but I'm going to ask it. All right. Do you think that your lack of confidence is down to the fact that you've got ginger hair?
It's blonde. It's not. I don't have the quality lighting that you have. My hair is become white, if anything, like on the sides. Yes. But I've always been blonde with a little strawberry blonde tint, I guess. But no, I've never had confidence, and I think the only time that I seem to have confidence is when I'm speaking to people about health and well-being, because it's something that I believe in. It's something I'm passionate about. I hope that comes through. Apologies for my Welsh accent. I am working on improving that. But it's difficult to talk, isn't it? It's difficult to get that message across and being informative and in such a way that you're not monotone and people switch off and you go into too much detail. But I love what I do. I love helping people. And I love talking about our way of life, and I love the science behind it. So yeah, any questions, chuck them in the comments, because I will gladly come on and make this a regular thing, and we will keep it to 45 minutes next time.
No. I think we'll go. I'm actually thinking of a much longer form where we try to get people to drop in. So that's something I'll talk to you about off air. But there's an interesting comment there from Charger Mopar. Well, anyway, I hate exercise, but I've been carnivore a long time. Do you find that is quite common that people hate exercise?
Yeah, and I don't think, yes, exercise, I believe, is incredibly good for you. But I work with, I'd say, in fact, the majority of my clients have never done a day's training in their life. You don't have to train. I believe that the majority of health and well-being comes from the food that we eat. We all know that person who is knocking on 100, who you see in town every day, walks 10 to 15 miles a day. They don't train in the gym, but they're super active. They're always talking to people, keeping their brain active. Maybe not always eating the right foods, but they eat real food. They go home and cook their own food. That you never see them with a takeaway or in Burger King or McDonald's or eating some fast food. So, I genuinely believe that consuming the food, nutrition is the key to longevity. Nutrition is the key to being fit and healthy. If you want to put some exercise in, fantastic. But exercise comes in lots of form. If you just go for a walk up the local woods or river or mountain or through the local town, take in the scenery, if you have any, because it makes you feel good. When you go somewhere and you look out over a mountain range or over the sea. I went for a bike ride recently, and there was a part of the coastline near to where I live that I'd never been to before, and it was impressive. It was almost euphoric, riding past it, because it was beautiful. And in that instant, I had nothing else in my mind, and I'm the type of person who worries and stresses about everything. But in that instant, nothing. I didn't have a care in the world. So it's good. It's good for the brain. So if you can be active, fantastic. But it's not a necessity by any means.
Yeah, and I think yeah. No, I'm sorry. I was reading the answer there actually. 40-year carnivore, which is amazing. So that's, if you don't mind, if you'd like to contact me, I'd love to talk to you and interview for my channel, because 40-year carnivore, the most I've interviewed is someone on 22 years. And I've got a 14-year carnivore, but 40-year carnivore is amazing, actually. But you're right, Richard, because exercise isn't essential for the recomposition of your body. It definitely is nutrition. And people often get that remark wrong and think you're saying you don't have to exercise. Well, exercise is good. We're not saying it's not good, but it isn't a prerequisite. In fact, if you said to me, you can have twins here, you can do a study with these twins. One is going to eat rubbish and exercise. Absolutely. Knockout exercise is going to be brilliant exercising. And the other twin is going to have absolutely on point nutrition, but not exercise. Who's going to look the best? And I tell you, it will be the one with the good nutrition, or be the healthiest, actually, is possibly a better thing. But that would be a long-term experiment, because I've seen that. I've lived that. I was not eating great. I was eating allegedly healthy, low fat, skim milk, freshly squeezed orange juice, lots of fruit and veg, not touching red meat, not eating any fat. And of course, where did I end up? Lower left quadrant pain, pre-diabetic, just getting tubby, and I did everything perfectly. Didn't smoke, didn't drink. So I think I am a little sort of N=1 about that, because as soon as I changed my nutrition, everything improved. And also with people that we coach. And, if someone hates exercise, but they still see their body composition change, and they feel healthier and their blood pressure goes down and their blood glucose management is better, it's going to be all down to nutrition. And we see it. We do see it. So I think that's good. So yes, so I'm going to try and get that person on who's been a long time carnivore. For 40 years, possibly that's the longest that I personally have heard of.
Yeah, me too. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
There's another comment there. 55 in a month and I feel 25. Yeah, I'm not 55, but I certainly feel the healthiest and fittest that I have ever been. So get them on. That sounds like a fantastic interview, isn't it? Incredible.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I deliberately wear this born in 1964 thing, because I'm 59 in a couple of weeks' time, and I do feel much, much younger than my age. And I think that's one of the great things about this way of eating. So yes, right. I will wrap up, Richard. What do you think?
No problem at all. No worries. It's been a pleasure chatting as always.
No, it's good, but please don't apologize for all the science and the mechanism, because I think that's really good, and that's your thing. That's but you also give the answer at the beginning, so I think that's fantastic. I'm going to thank everybody on YouTube for tuning in, and thank you for the comments. And we've been on for 1 hour and 48 minutes, so that's an hour longer than I normally do. So I'm glad that you've all tuned in and stayed this far. And
yes, thank
you
guys.
Find Richard at Instagram. It's down at the bottom of the screen now.
Fantastic. Thank you all.
I thought you were going to say something. Were you going to wrap up there? Do you want to wrap up?
I thanks all the listeners, and thank you for the invitation to come back on again. It chatting is, as you rightly say, we tend to get carried away, don't we? But it absolutely fantastic. Thoroughly enjoyed. Can't wait for the next one. Let's make it a regular thing. Let's get those comments in with some questions, and we'll smash those up the park on the next one.